Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jade Maxwell Rodriguez, and I will be moderating this virtual town hall. I would like to welcome everyone joining us through Zoom or watching on the webcast. I'd like to review a few housekeeping items before we get started. We will be conducting a short one-question poll for those individuals who are participating by Zoom. If I could ask everyone who is able to complete the poll that should now be visible on your screen, just so we can get a sense of who is participating in the town hall today. I'd also like to note that we will have ASL interpretation, French interpretation, and closed captioning to support our participants at today's town hall. This event will be recorded and will be made available after the event on our website, conversations.yorku.ca. I would like to thank everyone who has submitted a question in advance. I'll be asking these questions throughout today's session. Where possible, where there are questions in a similar nature, I will try and bundle them together to allow us to address as many questions as possible. We will also be taking questions during the town hall in a few different ways. You can post questions using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screens. We also have a dedicated email address, conversations@yorku.ca. The link is also on the webcast website. If you're watching on YouTube, please use the email address to post your questions. Our moderating team will also be monitoring the Q&A and will choose several questions to be asked live during the town hall. If your question is selected, you will be notified and your microphone will be turned on so you can ask the question live. There will likely be more questions than we have time to answer. Anything that we are unable to answer during today's town hall will be forwarded to the appropriate departments for an answer, and you will receive a response if you provide us your contact information. We will also be updating our Q&A page on the Better Together website to reflect these questions and responses from today's session. With that, I'd like to hand it over to President Linton to get started.
Thank you so much, Jade. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour and bonjour. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. And I very much appreciate the fact that given that the town hall is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space, that the land acknowledgement may not be the same for the territory that you're currently on. We ask that if that is the case, that you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area, known as Takaronto, has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So I want to limit my remarks today to a few important topics and try to leave the majority of our time for Q&A. But first of all, let me just welcome everyone to the 2021 academic year and our first virtual town hall of the term. Not unexpectedly, there have been several bumps along the way in launching the 2021 academic year remotely. I want to say that I remain indebted to all of the staff and the faculty members and our students who have rallied together to ensure that York University not only persists during these challenging times, but thrives. As you know, our decision-making throughout the pandemic has prioritized the safety and well-being of our community members. And efforts continue to be made to provide clear guidelines as early as possible in order to maximize the time that we all have to prepare for the new realities that we are facing. The majority of our courses, as you know, are being offered online, with the exception of a small number of courses that we've deemed require in-person activities in order to meet the student learning outcomes. However, faculty members have been designing virtual ways to offer work-integrated learning, experiential education opportunities, and in some cases where it is safe to do so, offering some voluntary in-person activities on the campuses. Importantly, our research continues both on and off our campuses. Services, including essential student supports, are being offered both in person and remotely. For those who do need to be on our campuses, non-medical mouth and nose coverings continue to be mandatory in common outdoor spaces within buildings, and in cases where social distancing cannot be easily maintained, outside as well. I'm urging everyone to sign up for the tracking app so that we can do all that we can to ensure that we reduce the number of new cases. If you have been on campus, you will also have noticed classrooms, shared offices, library facilities, teaching labs, and other academic and non-academic spaces are being reorganized to help ensure safety. Additional protective measures, such as plexiglass barriers, have also been installed. I know that we are all continuing to watch the updates that are being provided by health officials, and we will need to continue to be cautious and mindful for the sake of our community's health. As always, you can expect regular updates on any changes to the guidelines or plans from the university. The latest information can always be found at http://youbettertogether.info.yorku.ca, including our new COVID case counter that will ensure that our community is fully informed. I want to turn my attention a little bit to the e-class disruption. Obviously, the disruption to that platform that we experienced 2 weeks ago was very unfortunate. I know that the outage caused frustration for many students and faculty members, as well as the UIT staff themselves who were maintaining the platform. Unlike some universities, York has a robust schedule all year long, and it therefore can be challenging to identify what is the optimal time for necessary upgrades. With our increased reliance on online learning environment, we knew that we would have to significantly increase capacity. The number of e-class users has, for example, increased from 8,000 users last year to 16,000 users per minute this year. But once the disruption occurred, I want you to know that we brought in Oracle engineers to work with our own IT specialists to maximize a quick turnaround to the fix. And throughout last week, the system has maintained a fast response time while also performing reliably. The UIT teams will continue to work to ensure and to improve the performance and the reliability of eClass and to prevent disruptions in the future. We know that eClass is a vital tool for our faculty and our students, especially right now. So I can assure you that we are continuing to explore opportunities to ensure that the platform is running at optimal speeds and is stable and reliable overall. Further funds have in fact been targeted and invested in our IT systems and expertise. Let me turn for a moment to talk about the health of the university. I want to say that despite all of the challenges facing higher education and the world right now, I want to emphasize that as a consequence of all of our combined effort, York still is managing to advance strategic priorities and is poised to take up the new University Academic Plan 2020-25 in order to continue to strengthen the university and our positive impact on our students and the recovery of the province in Canada. Some of you may recall that we undertook scenario planning last term regarding possible enrollment challenges that we might face and the potential impact on the budget. We developed a contingency plan based on what we thought would be the most likely scenario, and that outlined the various initiatives that we could take if necessary. But at the same time, we decided to really intensify our recovery efforts over the summer, continuing to expand our strategic enrollment management plan. Several years ago now, York really undertook a comprehensive SEM approach to always making sure that we were tracking and could pivot quickly to increase, to think about how we could maximize retention if we were down in areas. And those SEM plans, the strategic enrollment management plans, they're part of a broader planning and budgeting strategy that has ensured that this university has been able to mitigate cuts to tuition and now the pandemic while continuing to invest in the university. Importantly, all of those efforts continue to pay off. Our enrollment picture has improved in both the August and September updates, allowing us to be considerably more optimistic than we were in May. We are now on track to meet our targets. We will still be facing a drop in our intake, our new students, but not to the extent that we were concerned about. And in fact, we are slightly over on our continuing domestic students and just slightly below for international students. I want to emphasize that there still remains volatility in enrollment, and therefore we have to track the potential for a greater melt, for example, between now and the November 1 count. But I want to say as well that where we've landed on enrollment is a tremendous accomplishment, thanks to the collective hard work and the commitment that we all have to our students and to each other. We're going to continue to provide regular updates, and the faculties are obviously tracking their own enrollments to the community so that we continue to have a really good sense of enrollment, and importantly, so that we can continue to start making additional investments in the university, given this somewhat more optimistic enrollment picture. So if we think about investments and advancing the UAP 2025, I want to say that we have some very positive signs for the university. The provincial government has recognized York's commitment to serving the needs of students, as well as our role in the recovery of York Region and the province through their support now of the Markham Centre campus. And as we take up the new UAP, we're going to find new ways to continue to enhance our services to our students, advance new programs, pedagogical innovation, how we can leverage what we're learning now, research discovery and application, while continuing to engage partners from across the sectors in responding to the pandemic and other UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have importantly been continuing to work on overcoming the harmful legacy of systemic anti-Black racism in the context of a new equity plan for the university. Several weeks ago, I provided an update on some specific initiatives resulting from consultations with Black students, faculty, and staff. These crucial conversations will continue to inform an anti-Black racism framework currently underway. In the meantime, we are happy to report that advertisements for 12 new tenure stream positions for Black scholars, as well as one open to Black and Indigenous and one available to Black, Indigenous, and racialized minority candidates, have been authorized for 2021. These new hires will add to not only specific program strengths that we have, but it will also help to increase the representation of Black faculty across the entire university. We also welcomed Professor Carl James as a Senior Advisor, Equity and Representation in the Division of Equity, People, and Culture. We are fortunate to have Professor James' deep and internationally recognized expertise to help us achieve our equity, diversity, and inclusion goals. Together with Professor James, Vice President of Equity, People, and Culture, Sheila Cote-Meek, will lead the development of a university equity plan that will bring together York's Indigenous framework, our anti-Black racism framework in progress, our EDI framework for chairs, and other important initiatives, all aimed at addressing inequality. We are grateful to all of the community members who have taken the time to share their experiences and thoughts with the senior administration. But I also want to thank those students and colleagues who for many years have worked to advance the equity, diversity, and inclusion at York through innovative programs and initiatives, and who continue to do so. I am aware of initiatives being undertaken across many of our faculties and divisions, and it is through that collective action that change will occur. A very quick note on our vision for the university as we move forward. Many of you will remember that we spent time last year understanding what our community felt was special and unique about the university, and what they felt was most important to them in a university. This research included staff, faculty, students, international research partners, and community leaders. The research findings informed a brand new strategy, a brand strategy. I know not everyone likes to talk about brand, but how to represent who we are as an institution. And that refreshed, differentiated identity, it captures our shared sense of purpose, and it also sets out a promise to all of those who engage with us. That identity, that brand, is aligned perfectly with our new university academic plan, and it centers around how all of us at York are committed to driving positive change in the world around us. Over the coming weeks and months, you're going to see that brand come to life in many ways, including training to help staff understand how to align our work with our priorities, updates on key institutional projects, a new communication campaign with vibrant new visuals and stories about our university. By providing clarity on who we are as an institution, what we stand for, and the values that we bring to the world through our teaching, research, and creative activities, we will continue to enhance York's reputation, drive enrollment, and attract funding and strategic partnerships. The pandemic has given us a renewed sense of purpose as a university. And as we begin this academic year, I look forward to hearing from you on how we can continue to drive positive change, both within our community and for the local and global communities that we serve. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. And I would like to take this moment to invite the rest of the panel to put on their cameras and to take a moment to each identify themselves because we're all here to answer your questions. So perhaps I could just ask our provost to start.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Phillips. I'm a faculty member at Osgoode and currently serving as the provost.
Amir?
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi everyone. Bon après-midi, mesdames et messieurs. My name is Amir Asif. I serve as Vice President, Research and Innovation. Thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Sheila?
Ani, bonjour, kwe, hello. My name is Sheila Cote-Meek, and I'm the Vice President of Equity, People, and Culture. Good to be here this afternoon.
Carol?
Oh, bonjour. I'm Carol McCauley, Vice President, Finance and Administration.
Jeff?
Hello and bonjour, everybody. I'm Jeff O'Hagan. I'm Vice President of Advancement, and I'm very pleased to be here with all of you today.
And Lucy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lucy Fromwitz. I'm the Vice Provost student, and a particular welcome to all our continuing students and a very warm welcome to our newest community members, our new students.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Lenton. I think we're going to start with some questions. We have already received a number of questions by email, so I'm going to start with those, and I start to see questions that are coming in through the Q&A function and through email, so I'll encourage participants to continue to send our questions. Our first question comes from a student, and And it reads, I had a question about which buildings, facilities, libraries, restaurants will be open on our campuses with social distancing. I understand that York Lanes is open, but will locations like Starbucks and Tim Hortons also be open? And will they have seating areas that will allow for social distancing?
Carol, do you want to start with that maybe, and then Lucy can add anything?
Sure. I think the best source of information that's up to date is the website, York University or YU Better Together. It has a full listing of buildings that are open and food service outlets that are open. Starbucks in Central Square, I believe, is open right now, and there is some limited seating, of course, keeping in mind the need to physically distance and the health and safety of our community. Some outlets in York Lanes are open. And as there's more activity on campus, we do expect others to open. But I really suggest going to that link and to keep yourself up to date on to what is open now and what any future plans will also be there once we know that what they are.
Anything else, Lucy?
Just to add that there's also around the quad, there's a number of food outlets open there. And of course, our students and residents have access to food outlets for them through their meal plans.
Lisa, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that I believe that as of today, I believe that some of our library spaces are available on a booking ahead basis for those who need a quiet study space on campus because they're living on campus or because they live nearby and don't have a great study space, or they might even be coming in for an in-person course such as a lab this fall. We have a few courses that are happening on campus. So check out the York University Library's webpage for more information about that.
And maybe Lisa, just building on your comments about the library, we have had a couple of questions about the opening of the archives, as well as whether the library will allow you to return and take out books. This particular student requires resources that are not always available in a digital form.
Yes, thank you for that question. Our libraries have actually done quite an amazing job of expanding the range of resources they can provide electronically through some special agreements with publishers, but also through a digitization service. So if something is only available in hard copy, they may be able to scan it and provide you with a digital copy. There is also, since I believe August, we've had a curbside pickup service. So there is a special locker that you can pick up books from if you contact the libraries in advance to ask to take that book out, and if it's something that cannot be accessed electronically. So there are a variety of ways that you can access resources electronically or in hard copy if necessary. So I would really encourage people to just check out the York University Libraries page, YUL. There's also information there about how you can contact a librarian directly to find out about your specific needs, and they can give you a hand.
And Lisa, I'm just wondering if you could also elaborate on French language resources. I'm not really quite sure what's happening with the library at Glendon right now.
I believe that spaces in the Frost Library are going to be opening up for bookable study space, but also that it is possible to request items from the Frost Library. I'm not sure if the curbside pickup happens at the Glendon campus or if it happens at the Kiel campus. It looks like Lucy might have the answer to that.
Lucy?
Actually, starting today, pickup for circulating print material is available from Bronfman, Frost, Scott, and Stacy.
Great. Our next question will be asked live about the winter term. Go ahead.
Hi. Hello. Yes, I have a question about the winter term. So we received an email from Vice-Provost student in August 11 about how they're finalizing the plans for the winter, and that we will receive more information in September. So I was wondering, what is the final decision? Is it going to be like fall, that we have like most of the classes online and some in person? And also I was wondering if the classes that are in person, if they're going to be optional to go in person, just because some people like may feel like unsafe to still go, just because I have some classes that it says like if safe, like it will be in person. So I was wondering if that will be optional or if it's like mandatory to go.
So because we really appreciate how important it is that everyone, our faculty and students and staff, really know as early as possible what the situation is, we did decide to extend the same provisions, given how we were tracking very closely with public health, the cases, what was happening with the pandemic, and made the decision that we really should continue with the same format, where the majority of courses will be offered online or through other remote means. As in the fall, there are a number of courses, perhaps about 70 in total, where the student learning outcomes, it's very, very difficult to achieve those without in-person activities. Now, of course, when we do have a course that we think needs to be offered in person, we made the agreement that would be very clearly marked on the course outline so that students would know from the syllabus if in-person attendance was part of the requirement of the course. And even when we have in-person requirements, of course, all normal safety precautions are also being pursued in terms of social distancing, in terms of the use of masks and so forth. So I don't know whether or not the provost wants to add anything to that. I'd turn it over to her.
Thank you. Yes, I would just add that in fact, we've done a little bit better than the course outline. We have been able to inform students at the point when they choose their courses. And we'll do the same for the winter, whether or not there is a required in-person component in that course. So we're just in the process now of wrapping up the survey of instructors for the winter term, and we'll be able to put that into the system by early October to let students know before they enroll in a course for the winter, whether it has an in-person required component. So other courses that don't say required in-person may have some in-person optional components, but they will be optional. Every other course, unless it says that in-person is required, every other course will have the ability to complete it entirely remotely if that is your preference.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next question comes from a staff member. Will the university be issuing T2200s for the 2020 tax year, as employees have now exceeded 6 months of working remotely, which fits the criteria from the Canadian Revenue Agency?
Would that be Sheila or Carol who could answer that question?
Probably either of us, but I can certainly answer it. We're aware that many employees will be eligible to be able to claim some costs associated with the home office against their taxes for the 2020 year, because we have been working from home for quite some time. And so working with the CRA rules, which may be changing with respect to just what kind of documentation is necessary, but the university will be issuing the necessary documentation to employees who've been working from home during this period. Yes.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, my next question is around international. So I'm just combining a few questions. I'm trying to do my best. A student has asked about when students will be able to travel to Canada and when they'll be able to experience in-person classes. And another student has asked when we will know whether students can participate in winter term exchanges abroad.
So I'm going to ask my colleagues to elaborate, but let me just share with you that this has been one of the major activities that the executive, that the presidents of the various universities, not just in Ontario, but across Canada, have been mobilizing on in terms of having a conversation with the federal government, and then the federal government in combination with the provinces, because the supporting a corridor for international students to more easily attend their chosen universities requires a coordination between the federal government and the provincial government. We've been advocating very strongly to do everything that the federal government can on opening up the borders for international students on supporting visa applications. Of course, some students already have approved visa applications. We were hoping that those plans would be in place for September. I want to say that the federal government, in discussion with the provinces, came up with a very specific process by which each university would have to submit a plan for how we would support international students coming in, the quarantine, tracking, testing as necessary, and so forth. York University in Ontario was the first university to actually get its plans in. We were the first, if not the first, certainly one of the first to say that we would support financially the quarantine period for our international students. So we're ready. We have our plan, and we continue to press along with other university presidents, the governments, to try to coordinate this. Unfortunately, we don't have control of opening up travel restrictions, and we're going to have to work with government on that. I just want to say that we are ready at York to be very responsive, and our focus now is on winter. It is trying to see whether or not everything could be put in place to make it possible for students to easily travel here in November, December, so that they could arrange those plans well in advance of the January term starting. Similarly, in terms of our students traveling elsewhere on international placements, I think I'm going to turn that over to the provost. I'm not 100% sure where those plans are at the moment.
Sorry, challenges unmuting. We are at the moment focusing on establishing as many virtual global classrooms as we possibly can, so that students have the ability to engage in global learning even before we have the option of study abroad. And I believe, I'm going to turn it to Lucy, but I believe that we are really in a holding pattern about the winter term study abroad, and whether that might be possible with some countries. Lucy, do you have more information on that?
Thank you, Lisa. Our number one guiding principle is health and safety. So clearly that is what's going to drive our decisions. And as the president said, we work continuously with the Canadian government, with the health officials, Canada and the province. We are working with all our partners around the world and having these conversations, not only for our students to provide opportunities for them to go abroad, but for their students to come here. In the meanwhile, exactly as the provost said, we are planning for alternative programming and virtual learning opportunities. We believe at the beginning of October, at the latest, we will be letting our students know whether they might be able to go abroad and whether exchange students might be able to come to Canada.
Okay, my next question is regards to closed captioning. Will York consider funding a campus-wide automated closed captioning capability for Zoom? This should be a default capability when pursuing universal design for learning.
Lucy, are you able to comment on that? I'm not quite sure.
I don't have the information, but we certainly can commit to posting it as soon as it is available.
Let us take that question away. I think that's a really important question, and we should have a conversation about it. You know, we have been also trying to encourage faculty members to post their lectures, to make them available in an asynchronous format. We do appreciate that we're dealing with, in some cases, time change is different time zones, with people's ability to move at different speeds online. And so I think it's a more comprehensive approach that we actually need to be taking to ensure that we continue to move forward with our own plans for universal design and a fulsome response to the new AODA legislations as it evolves over the next number of years. So let us take that away and post a more fulsome answer to it once we have an opportunity to chat about it.
Our next question comes from a number of participants who have clearly checked out the Better Together COVID website. And their question is regards to the number of cases as it's reported on the website. Participants are looking for some additional details about those cases, whether that is the total active cases or total cases altogether. How notifications would happen if employees or students were exposed to those individuals, and what steps York would take to consider rolling back campus access as cases in Ontario continue to increase.
Lucy, I'm going to flip that over to you to start.
Thank you. So there were a number of questions. The first is, they would be the active cases. We don't post cases after people have been in self-isolation. So we have protocols in place. There is a very detailed incident management protocol, different for staff and faculty than students. And it involves anyone who has been on campus in the last while until they understood that they had contracted COVID. So a student has a variety of ways of letting us know. If they live on campus, then it is through their residence. We have an email that is checked constantly, or their DON or their community advisor. And then they are contacted immediately by staff from the university. We ensure they've been in contact with public health, and then public health really manages the situation. Public health is accountable and responsible for all contact tracing. They work with the individual, student, staff, or faculty to understand where they've been in the past while, and they are in touch with the appropriate people. If it is a student in residence, we have put aside quite a number of self-isolation, self-contained units. So we move the student immediately into a self-contained unit. We make sure that food is delivered to them, linens are delivered, that they're comfortable, and we touch base with them by phone once to twice every day, and they have an emergency number where they can reach us at any time. And then we're in touch with public health, and we really take directions from them. They let us know what, if any, further action is necessary. Staff and faculty have a different route. The protocol is at our website, You Better Together, and they can, if they have been on campus, report to their supervisor or their dean. If members have not been on campus, then this is personal health information. It's entirely up to them whether they wish to report it to us. But if they have not been on our campus, either of our campuses, then we will not be putting it up on the tracker.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that while York has a very skilled and talented emergency operations team that gives advice to the senior emergency planning group, that we in all cases, when it comes to active cases on campus and how we're managing that within the provincial context, work closely with the City of Toronto and the province as healthcare professionals and take advice from them about what is appropriate action to take depending on the modeling, the number of cases, how things are going in the City of Toronto and in the province. You'll be aware that the province recently made the decision to restrict the number of individuals who could be brought together outside or inside. And so we are always aligning our own decision-making with what the government and health officials are recommending to ensure that the well-being and safety of our community, it always comes first.
Thank you, President Lenton. Our next question will be asked live about Sustainable Development Goals, or also affectionately referred to as SDGs.
You know, I'm going to let the provost take this because she's really been leading York's entirely successful positioning on representing to the world our leadership in the area of SDGs. So Lisa, I'd like you to respond to what we do now and where we're going with the plan.
We could maybe just let the question be asked first, President Lenton.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the question.
No, it's going to be asked live. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Who have I interrupted?
Go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Katrin Cole, and I'm the coordinator to York University's UNESCO chair in reorienting education towards sustainability. And I'm wondering about the new university academic plan that recognizes the SDGs as a grand challenge and central framework. And we'd like to know what are the next strategic steps for the university as a whole in implementing the plan, and how can we as faculty and staff who directly work with UN agencies already, how can we remain involved? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm so thrilled that people want to remain involved because we had really great engagement last year, and it was a pretty uplifting series of meetings and fora that we held. So one suggestion that I've heard is that perhaps we want to continue to host some open fora, perhaps around clusters of the SDGs that might have strong connections to one another, to hear ideas from the community about what they would like to see the university doing, opportunities they see to build on what we already have been doing, but maybe engage more people, engage people across students, faculty, staff, instructors, volunteers, alumni, the many members of our community, and how we would like to, facilitate and support sort of, ground up ideas where people have something they'd like to work on together, and with a bit of resources, with a bit of organizational support, they could come together and do that. So that's one idea that has come forward. I'd be interested to hear other ideas. We'll be talking about this certainly with the Senate committees, certainly with the President's Sustainability Council. We have some staff resources assigned to make sure that we keep this conversation going. There's a large number of activities, as you will know, already underway that could be connected up for greater impact. So the conversation is open. I would say at this point, we need more engagement from the university community to determine where we want to direct our energies. But I think we also want to support a very wide array of activities that people want to do. One thing, for instance, that I'm looking at is, some of you will know about our Academic Innovation Fund that allows instructors to apply for a bit of money to help support a curricular innovation, a pedagogical innovation, and whether we could add to that teaching activities, learning activities that really focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. If people would like to add those into their course, add some kind of a hands-on component, perhaps working with a community agency. So those are a few ideas, but I think the main thing is I share your interest in finding more and more ways for our community to get involved with the SDG challenge.
Amir, I'm wondering if you'd like to comment as well from a research perspective.
So in terms of research, obviously, we have a number of initiatives in which we are collaborating with the United Nations, and we'll be bringing this information as things materialize. And in terms of staff members, graduate students, undergraduate students, there are organized research units, ORUs as we call them, as well as faculty members who are working on various aspects of SDGs. And you can get in touch with my office if you have particular interest. And when I say you, I mean the graduate students, undergraduate students, and my office will be more than happy to connect you with the faculty members who are working in these areas.
You know, I thank you, Amir. I'd just like to add that I think we've got a tremendous opportunity here to enhance the impact that York University already has. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment that we were ranked 33 out of 767 universities by the Times Higher Education impact on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've recently signed the only Canadian memorandum of agreement to set up a UN training center called a CFEL, which will include training of professionals and additional educational opportunities in the areas of, for example, emergency and disaster management. And if over the next year is part of actualizing, bringing to life the UAP, we can form a few groups around some key priorities where we think York could really make a difference. People have talked about climate change, homelessness, inequality. I mean, we have some real strengths at this university. And we've always said that York understands the importance of, in terms of thinking about the pillars that underpin this university, of connectedness, of connecting across sectors, not-for-profit, the private sector, the health sector, educational sectors, and working together to really maximize our impact on advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm very excited to see what areas will really kind of bubble up and how different folks across the university will come together to think about what particular initiatives could really make a profound difference.
Thank you all. The next question is related to remote working or changing of the workplace. And so we've had a couple of questions come in on this topic. Staff are wondering about how the university envisions the future of the workplace at York, and will the university consider any of the following options: designating positions as remote, on campus, or hybrid, creating a comprehensive employee-centered remote work policy, converting existing office spaces into hoteling stations for flexible working, and also shifting understanding of productivity from being present in person during set business hours to understanding productivity from a project or task basis.
Sheila, why don't you
That's a lot of questions all in one.
Sheila, why don't you start with that?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a great question. I think although there's been a lot of challenges with COVID and responding to the pandemic, there's also been some learnings that we've garnered from the experience, in that it's become more apparent that there are some opportunities for remote working at home. So we are working right now on an employee-centered remote work policy that will give some consideration to providing those opportunities for some positions. Keeping in mind, of course, that there are going to be some positions that staff are required to work on site. So it will be specific groups that would be considered for those kinds of positions. So yes, we are working on that, and look forward to bringing forth a policy in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Sheila. I would only add that from the beginning of the pandemic, we have talked about learning from our own expertise around emergency and disaster management to take an approach that's not just responding to the immediate, short-term needs to pressures of the pandemic itself, but to be thinking all the time about recovery and mitigation. How can we mitigate the impact, and how can we recover? And the Provost and the VPFA have been leading a service transformation exercise at the university about how we can continue to enhance all of the services that support our students, that support the academic activities of the university. And there are some lessons to be learned about necessarily we've had to shift our services off campus. But what does that tell us about how we think about productivity? Is there a possibility for us to use space differently and to look at what other sectors are doing around using hoteling space as opposed to having a dedicated office, many of which sometimes sit empty? We have to be mindful of employees who are able to work off campus and those who may not be able to work on campus. And we also have to be very mindful that some of these issues are covered in collective agreements, including where work is done and issues around space and so forth. So we would have to engage all of the different employee groups and the relevant unions on these matters. But I think there's a huge opportunity here for us to look and reflect on what have been the lessons that we've learned from this, what is worth keeping, perhaps, even post-pandemic. And so over this next year, led by VP Equity, People and Culture and VPFA and the Provost and others in all of the divisions, really, I think we'll be trying to have some of these conversations and with our unions to see if there are ways in which we can actually improve the work engagement and the work experience of all of our employee groups while not in any way, and perhaps even enhancing the services for our students and our faculty.
Thank you, President Linton. Our next question is coming to us live, and it's about hiring decisions. Go ahead.
Okay, in addition to creating jobs that will hire specifically Black people and diverse people, will York University be adjusting recruiting and hiring processes and practices to leave no or minimal room for discrimination and hold hiring managers and recruiters accountable for their selections to ensure that they are merit-based?
Well, let me start off just by saying something very brief. I'm just going to then turn it over to anyone on the team, on the panel here, to add. I think it's incredibly important because there's a couple of packed, really important components to your question. We understand very well that when we are trying to adjust or enhance diversity, inclusion, equity, that we're dealing with systemic, long historical challenges to anti-Black racism, for example, in the anti-indigeneity, and to really properly take on that history and to make a difference, a long-lasting difference at the university that breaks down the systemic aspect of inequality. That's going to take some fundamentally important changes to our structures, our processes, our policies, how we undertake searches, how we look at tenure and promotion, how we look at how awards are given out, how we look at progression opportunities for faculty members or staff. It's going to require very thoughtful, long-term engagement on the part of the entire university. But obviously, in all those instances, there's not a clash between the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of merit while thinking about how you're breaking down systemic racism, for example. These things can go, in fact, they should go hand in hand, because the pursuit of excellence should mean inclusive excellence, and it should mean that everybody has the same opportunities. So I think that a lot of the recommendations that have been coming forward in the consultation and what's going to be manifested in the equity plan will be very thoughtful about making sure that York University actually drives the commitment and the values that we have at the university. So I would just invite Sheila or any of my colleagues to comment if they wish.
Yeah, I don't mind if I do. Thank you, President Linton. I wanted to add that we currently have an affirmative action policy that's part of the Faculty Association collective agreement. And this year we're undertaking a review of that AA policy, partly in an effort to update the policy itself, but also to look at ways to improve the unconscious bias training that we do for all faculty hires. Now, I know the question was relative to staff hires, so I also wanted to add that we've been talking as well about utilizing aspects of that AA policy and applying them to the staff hires as well. So that's being discussed. Another piece that we're working on, President Lenton talked about the development of an EDI, or an equity, diversity, inclusion strategy. And as part of those initiatives, I would expect that there would be a review of staff recruitment selection processes as well that will be coming. I hope that helps answer the question.
Go ahead. Thank you, Sheila. Go ahead, Lucy.
And then what I would just like to add is when we're considering hiring, we're taking the process right back to the very beginning. And that is when we're even developing the job description and looking at the B4s. And that is, what are the bona fide requirements of that job? So we're simply not layering on any barriers. So we're trying to be very thoughtful, including where do we advertise for these positions, as well as everything throughout the hiring process that the president and the vice president, equity, people, and inclusion have spoken.
I think your sound sort of fell off in the last sentence, Lucy.
I asked, might I just go back to the closed captioning? The wonderful thing about these town halls is you ask us really important questions. And then while you see some of us who are responding, we have so many great staff behind us. So my staff have been messaging me the answers. So I will share some of that information, and that is there are several ways. One is if faculty members record their lectures and then it gets transferred. There's also an ability through PowerPoint, and we're looking at the ability through Zoom. But most important, the question identified that we need to put up a paper with the teaching commons that helps faculty know all the ways they can do this so we can provide comprehensive services to those who need it. So thank you.
I did want to thank you, Lucy. I did want to add one comment onto something that Lucy said about very practical next steps. Going back to our equity plan. We've been undertaking consultations for quite a long time at York University, really starting with the Indigenous framework, and then of course more recently around anti-Black racism. And then of course we had a situation on campus around other tensions around freedom of speech, and just how are we creating an inclusive, supportive environment. And I would say that the strategy going forward is that we'll continue to undertake those consultations. There are some great things happening right now on campus. People have got some champions in their faculty, and they're holding workshops. Some faculties have consultants that they've brought in to ask the question about how you can really, walk the talk. And what I was just discussing with the provost and the rest of the panel the other day was, we've got all these great learnings that are happening across the university in different divisions and faculties. What about having a workshop where we bring everyone together and share what we've been learning, what initiatives we're undertaking, and then that can sort of like inform and roll up into the equity plan. And once we have the equity plan, of course, it doesn't stop there. Then we have to think about what training is necessary. So how do we build that culture? How do we, to answer your question, how do we ensure that everyone is accountable around, whatever enhancements we have, our affirmative action language and so forth. And so there will need to be training, and that includes for the senior team as well. All of, the president, the vice presidents, the deans, managers, like we really all need to have our own awareness, I think, raised and informed by the consultations and the work that we're undertaking.
Thank you, President Lenton. The next question comes to us from a faculty member who works in AMPD and has a couple of questions related to group projects. So there's a number of courses that are either approved for in-person teaching or are being taught remotely. In either case, there are group projects in which students may need to meet in person to work on and complete their projects outside of class. What will be the case if a member or members of the group contract COVID-19? Will there be any liabilities for the instructor or the university? How can the university make equipment available for students for these projects? And are there any liability issues that faculty members should consider, or any policies that the university has put in place to address these issues?
Look, in the first instance, we should be taking every possible step that we can, even with group projects, to see whether or not those group projects can be done through Zoom or some other mechanisms. But if it's really imperative that students are coming together to undertake a group project that requires some in-person work, then all the social distancing and the other PPE, whatever precautions have been put in place, that needs to be followed. But I'm going to say that it's imperative that each of those faculty members is specifying with clarity what the requirements are. What happens if one of the students in the group has symptoms, that student be accommodated. You know, we had ourselves recently a retreat where we decided that we were going to do that in person. We booked space. I think that's the other really important question I'm going to put to the team, because in my view, it's better to book space on campus than to start kind of meeting at coffee shops or whatever. I think these things have to be very organized, especially given the more recent rules that have come in terms of the maximum numbers that can actually get together in any kind of unorganized situation. But we booked a space, we all wore masks, we did all the social distancing. One colleague felt it was important to call in, and so we arranged the technology, the Zoom, to make that possible. You know, flexibility is important right now because it's imperative that we are putting safety and wellness first. Lisa, do you want to add anything, or Lucy, about how things are being organized?
It is a complex question to know exactly what the university's responsibilities are to take care of its students, its faculty members, and sort of all the steps that fulfill that responsibility. So I would agree with everything that the president has said, and just underline the importance of accommodating those who might not be able to engage in a particular kind of in-person activity at a particular time, so that every member of the community feels that if they're feeling ill, or if they might have been exposed to somebody with COVID, that there's an alternate way for them to participate, to access the materials, to fulfill that requirement at a later time in a different way, for instance. So that nobody should feel that they're under pressure to make, you know, a choice that has risks to it. It's also why it's so important that we have let students know at the point of course enrollment whether a course will have a required in-person learning element, so that they can make some choices there where possible about what their comfort level is with that, and their own risk levels based on their personal health or that of their family members. So I would say that, you know, it's just really important to keep reviewing those protocols and to really pay attention to what the latest advice is about what's safe and what the university is asking of community members around screening, around PPE, and to inquire if you have any questions, if something is unclear about how to organize something that's supposed to be happening in your class, but you're not sure how to do it in a way that conforms to all the latest public health advice.
Thank you, Provost Phillips. Our next question will be asked live. Go ahead.
Hello, yeah. Has the university looked further into early retirement for individuals in the York pension plan? I know this was discussed at prior town halls a little bit.
Does Sheila or Carol want to take that question?
I can go ahead. Thank you. Yes, we are looking into a voluntary exit program. We're still working out some of the details around that. We've been consulting with various groups of people on campus. You can imagine that that there's conversations that have to happen with for example, union representation, etc. So, but we are working on something, and hopefully we'll be able to bring something forward in the next month or so.
Carol?
I might just add that it isn't specifically changes to the pension plan, that the Pension Fund Board of Trustees has not been looking at changes to the pension plan necessarily, but what my colleague Sheila is referring to is an exit program that is not necessarily using the pension as a vehicle. Changes to the pension plan sort of have its own governance component to it. And I know that we did engage as a all university pension committee before this pandemic hit. But that committee actually hasn't met since the pandemic hit, which is a good reminder to Sheila, Vice President colleague, and myself to think about getting a meeting of that committee together. So thanks for raising the question.
Thank you, Vice President Macaulay. Our next question, we've had a couple of questions further to your remarks, President Lenton, around e-class. So I'm just going to combine a couple of questions. One question is around support for faculty members using e-class. Given that it's new, it has at times been a frustrating experience for faculty members, as well as students often will contact their faculty member when they're experiencing technical challenges with e-class and wondering what kinds of supports are available for students so that they're not always emailing their faculty member about tech support questions. And the last piece is around timely notification. If for some reason, if e-class were to go down again, and hopefully that is not the case, would there be more timely notification to faculty members of the challenges that particular application is facing?
So let me start off by saying that we've really brought in a process if there should be any further difficulties with e-class, that while we're building, so much has been happening at the university and so many requests to IT to make this available online, make this available online. I think tomorrow, we're now going to make live an online, everyone told me to make sure my phone was off, and I'm really sorry, but apparently it's not off. My apologies. If individual colleagues, for example, need access to the campus for whatever reason, that's going to be able to be done online. So many requests coming in that managing to make sure that we've got all the training done and the expertise that we have in case there's any difficulty, certainly has got people working around the clock. But we recognize that, and we've got a process worked out now for very quickly pivoting to external advisors if we should need additional support. I hear you on notice. We'll definitely share that information and think about the most timely way if we see any instability whatsoever. We're not currently seeing any instability with e-class. It's behaving reliably, and it's able to manage on trials more than the current peak that we've been seeing this first week. I would like your suggestion a lot of having a kind of a call center that students, or for that matter, faculty, could call into if there was a particular issue with e-class, so that students weren't necessarily all having to go through their faculty members. I don't know whether or not I could ask Lisa or Lucy or someone. Could we, Lisa?
I can start. UIT has been definitely over the summer looking at the specific areas where they need to bolster their resources to provide more accessible support. They have put on some staff in the evenings, for instance, during the weekdays, to make sure there's always somebody that you can contact through the chat function or by phone. Although they find chat is much better because they can actually help multiple people at once. So we are looking again at, do we need to further bolster that support so that when there is a troubleshooting issue, when something is going wrong, you're in the middle of a class, for instance, that you would be able to reach somebody right away. So that concern has definitely been heard. If I could just say that UIT does on its website have some terrific resources for how students can get commonly asked questions answered about accessing eClass, how to use Zoom, how to use different functions on eClass. And so I encourage you to explore that website a little bit. And you might want to, if you haven't already, build into your syllabi or your eClass site the links for students to go to get those basic onboarding supports or to answer their questions about the basic use of online learning technologies. And you might even consider pushing that out again in the event that there's some challenges, or pushing out the communications you've seen about what's going on with eClass. I do hope that, we're fine now. We've sort of come through the peak usage time, and we've done it quite smoothly. And so I'm hoping that we are well equipped now to have eClass functioning well for the remainder of the term. But definitely the need for timely, quick communication if there are problems has definitely been heard. That's a lesson learned.
Thank you, Provost Phillips. Oh.
The one other thing I will add is that the Learning Skills for Students group have posted a student guide to remote learning. And it came out last week in something called This Week at York. And if you missed that, just go to the website, This Week at York, and you can pick that up. But it's a site that will walk students through all the remote learning technologies that we use, have tips, and also direct you to helpful websites if you do encounter problems.
Thank you, Vice Provost Fromwitz. My next question is around students experiencing financial challenges. We've had a couple of questions come in. The first part of the question is, the emergency bursary or fund was available in the spring, and the student is wondering if it will also be available for students facing financial challenges this fall. Secondly, another student has written in to say that they're experiencing financial challenges and wondering if the university would be willing to provide free access to course textbooks for this upcoming year. And the third question related is around whether or not external alumni or donors have been invited to think of ways in which they can support students during this very challenging financial time.
Yeah, so on the student emergency bursary, when some individual faculty members and staff indicated that they would really like to support contributing in some way, and we set up the student emergency bursary, we immediately let all board know, and many of us on the board immediately contributed to that fund. And the goal was to contribute to it so that it would sustain longer than just the immediate pressures of spring, summer, that it would be able to get enough donations and also continue to receive donations so that we could continue that support into the fall and into the winter. I don't right now know, I'm not sure if Jeff O'Hagan, our Vice President of Advancement, can let us know how that fund is doing and about any current plans to sustain that. But for sure, the goal is to continue that support. And just before I go to Jeff, though, I want to let you know that we don't have control over the cost of textbooks. So that'll be the publisher's control. However, our Dean of Libraries, she has been advocating for some time with faculty members to try as much as possible to use open access materials precisely to help bring down the costs of materials. Unfortunately, it's not always possible because a faculty member is not going to want to compromise on the quality of the textbook or the materials that he or she might want to use if they can't find something that's right on open access. But we certainly do and have been trying to pay attention to that. We always make a certain number of copies available through the libraries so that if students are not able to purchase an online textbook, or however, I know a lot of publishers also are allowing students to just I'm not sure what the technical term is, sort of just to rent a certain time of access to the book to try to bring down costs. But so we are paying attention to all of those different costs, to always be thinking about how we can minimize a cost to students. I'm wondering if Jeff could just let us know about the fund.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. I'm very pleased to talk about this. We've had tremendous support from our community, and again, initiated actually with our on-campus community in wanting to support students through this difficult time. And there was a COVID-19 relief fund. There still is a COVID-19 relief fund that was launched early on when it became evident that students were facing real emergency issues. And those funds are matched with the university funds for the emergency bursaries. The idea, though, was to continue to raise funds for the longer term needs that are now emerging with students. There has been over $425,000 raised from donors, and those funds are being deployed to students to support them in their needs. We are continuing to reach out to our external communities for their continuing support. There's information on our website, on the giving section of the York University website, for people to be able to give online to support that fund. And there's at least one story and more to come about donors and students that have responded and been receiving the funds. So under the Better Together website, there's a story of some students that have received these funds and some of the donors that have funded that. And we are certainly encouraging that. So if you're in touch with fellow alumni or faculty, staff, students, anybody that would like to contribute, we are still collecting funds, and we hope to continue to be able to support students, not only in the short term, but in the longer term with needs that are continuing to arise.
And Jeff, how do students find out about that fund? So where are the funds located so that individual students can find out about it? Maybe Lucy knows if you don't.
Right. I was going to turn it to Lucy to describe the process. Once we're certainly working to collect the donations, but the process for students applying for these kinds of funds does happen through the Vice-Provost students area and through student support.
Thank you, Jeff. So just ahead of COVID last year, we dispersed about $3.6 million in bursary, but then COVID hit and we realized our students who were counting on paying their rent with the jobs that they had at the moment, everything shut down. So we did create these two emergency bursary funds. One was $2 million worth to help those students who just couldn't pay rent, couldn't buy food. Really, they were in an urgent situation. And then we created a separate travel bursary emergency for either our students who were abroad who needed to change travel plans to get home, or our international students here who had to change travel plans to get home, and that was expended. So currently we do not have an emergency bursary fund active. However, we will be expending between $6.5 and $7 million in bursary funds this fall. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, if you go to the Student Financial Services site, you'll see an SFP, a Student Financial Plan. If you are having difficulty purchasing books or whatever your financial difficulties are, you can fill out that form and we continue to process. And as well, if you are a graduate student, there is an emergency fund for students who find themselves in dire straits of not being able to pay rent or purchase food. That's available through the Faculty of Graduate Studies. The form, however, is also on the Student Financial Services site.
We've just received a follow-up question to this sort of set of questions, and it looks like a participant is wondering whether or not the York U Student Center Food Bank is still accepting donations, and are students in need of non-perishable food, and if people would like to make a donation, how would they do that?
Go ahead, Lucy.
I can't speak as to whether they are accepting donations. They work very closely with the Second Harvest. They are open and they are distributing food packages on campus in front of the Second Student Center building 1 day a week. And I would suggest that if you're interested in cash donations, if you go to the York Federation of Student website, I'm sure they would have information readily available, or you contact them directly. And I imagine they'd be greatly appreciative of support for our students through their food bank.
Thank you, Lucy. We're almost at time, so I've just bundled 2 questions together, and it's about reopening. One participant is wondering whether or not we will be returning to work on campus in the winter term. And a second slightly related question is whether researchers will have greater access to campus as doing research remotely is becoming more and more difficult.
I'm going to turn the research question over to our Vice President of Research and Innovation, and then I'll just finish off with a couple of remarks about campus reopening. So Amir, first to you. You're on mute, Amir.
So thank you, Rhonda. In terms of our research, we have provided limited access to researchers or access to limited researchers, depending upon the research needs of these researchers. So far in phase 1 and 2 of what we call ramping up research, we have about 500 researchers, that includes graduate students and faculty members, who are pursuing their research on campus. In terms of the next steps, in terms of continuous access to campus.
You went back on mute, Amir.
Sorry. In terms of continuous access to campus for research purposes, we are carefully observing the COVID-19 situation. If conditions improve, we may initiate phase 3 of ramping up research to enable access to campus for research purposes. A guiding principle remains that researchers who can continue their research activities off campus should continue to do so, given the limited capacity we have due to COVID-19 health and safety requirements. In terms of one-time access to the university, I understand that the Office of Provost will soon be making an announcement on an online submission framework that faculty members or researchers can use to request one-time access.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, thank you very much, Amir. I wanted to just expand a little bit on that to say that in addition to one-time access, we are expanding access for faculty members who are teaching this term and who have an office on campus and who would like to be able to have recurring access to their office at certain times in the week to do preparation or to be able to deliver a lecture, so that there be a little bit more ability for those who are teaching to access on-campus facilities as well, in particular their offices. We also have some classrooms that are set up for lecture recording that can be booked to come in with technology support to do that in a really good, well set up space. We have heard the concern from many of those course directors this fall who are managing to do their course delivery at home for the most part, but who feel they really could enhance the learning experience if they were able to access their offices for whatever reason because of their setup at home. And so we are about to release that form. It should be out tomorrow, I understand, with a communication. And then as we go forward, we'll look to, what is the next priority and the next priority to be able to bring more people onto campus. I think it is important that we keep a close eye on knock-on effects. In other words, if we are having more faculty come onto campus for teaching or research purposes, there may be more pressures to bring staff onto campus as well. And our staff may not be ready to do that. We also may not find it consistent with health protocols to sort of multiply the numbers of people coming onto campus. So we will have to take this slowly. We will have to do it gradually. Faculty who are coming onto campus may not find that there's all the typical supports that they're used to available. It may be really a matter of being able to use your office, and that's about all for the moment. So we hope that that will just gradually increase over time in terms of a sense of normalcy and access to more of our typical ways of doing things, but we will have to take it quite slowly.
So look, for all of our new students and staff and faculty, really appreciate that this was not the way in which you thought you would be joining the university, and also for our continuing students and staff and faculty. These are challenging times. Many of you are looking after children, other loved ones. Some of you obviously may have personal circumstances which are more challenging in this environment. I think it's just so incredibly important that you know that we are committed, even as we make our reopening plans. You know, we have begun to sit down and talk about what's possible, when it's possible, how we can respond to individual needs of staff and students and faculty to give everyone the very best experience that we can, but always making sure that we are following the health and safety guidelines. Everyone knew that once children started going back to K-12 and that, you know, higher education started to open up slightly, and that there would be some potential risk for an increase in cases. So we all have to still be very cautious and hope to, you know, move forward with plans to, as we've said, to prioritize that kind of increasingly open, responsiveness to needs, but understanding that when you do that, there's a whole underbelly of how you manage social distancing, how you manage washrooms, how you manage elevators, how you manage business building maximum numbers. So we want to be cautious. We want to move carefully. We all together will get through this, and we all look forward to the full reopening of our campuses as soon as it is safe to do so. So with that, I'm going to say, please know that if you are in need of resources, especially around mental health or any stress that you're dealing with, we have academic support, we have counseling services, they're available remotely. We have our Teaching Commons workshops, we have staff resources available to those working remotely, and you can learn more by visiting yorku.ca/mental health. And also the yorku.ca/bettertogether websites. Until we have an opportunity to see you again, either through town hall or hopefully eventually in person, please take care. Thank you.
This concludes our town hall for today. We have posted a survey on our website, conversations.yorku.ca. We look forward to getting your feedback so that we can continue to enhance our future virtual town halls. I would like to thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day. Take care and be well.
Bye, everyone.